Today's talk is designing difficulty, or basically how not to let your players rage quit your game. I was inspired to make this presentation because for the last, couple of years, I see not only game jam games, but generally games, even outside of game jams, that have this thing with the difficulty level. They're being too hard, they're just frustrating to the players. And this is something that we can talk about for a very long time, hours on end, but I decided to make it very short, just half an hour, just to go basically on pencil tips of and ideas, just very quick concepts to help you think about and maybe further look into or consider when you're working on your own games. And I don't believe it's something that's actually discussed much. I've seen tutorials and videos and stuff online that discuss about game design, but they don't always talk about this part. So let's get into it. Very quick introduction. Thank you, Alacris, for already introducing me. The quick thing is, yes, I'm a game developer now. I work at Placeholder Gameworks. If any of you recognize those games, Death and Taxes came out a couple of years ago, a few years now. Broken Alliance is out, and Craft is coming out next month. I also am a lecturer at Talon University in the DLG program. You're welcome to apply. All right, so for today's content, it's very brief, very quick, to the point. First thing I want to explain when I talk about difficulty is like, what is the difference between challenge and difficulty? Because that part might be, people will be thinking about is like, what's the difference? And so we have basically the idea set straight. And then a few types of difficulty, not all of them, but what would be considered frustrating or easy to the player. All right, so the first thing, what is the challenge and what is the difficulty? If you think about it, a challenge is kind of the requirements that you put on your player, right? And around them, you design a challenge and you design the mechanics for the player to overcome that challenge. So if I challenge you, say, oh, I want you to jump from this platform all the way to the door back there, do a backflip and land on your feet. That's a challenge. It's a very ridiculous challenge, but it is what I require you to do. And then I allow you to jump, and I allow you maybe, I don't know, to land on people's heads on the way. Please don't do that. But that would be the challenge, right? Of course, no one would attempt that challenge because the chances of success are maybe like 0.1%. So it's a ridiculous challenge. But if I say, I don't know, jump from this platform to the first row, we're like, okay, it's too easy. It's actually boring. It's a challenge. I require you to do something to give you some reward, but it's too basic, and you're probably not going to do it because, like, what's the point, right? So that is the idea of a challenge, what I give you to do, and it should be enjoyable. And I took Breath of the Wild here, Legend of Zelda, as one example, as ultimate challenge. I don't play a lot of Zelda games, played a couple, seen a couple, but I believe almost all of them, if not most of them, you always start the game with the very first challenge, defeat Ganon, the big evil that is ruining the whole world. And it is a ridiculous challenge when you begin the game, because there is no way I'm starting with like, I don't know, very basic level, I have nothing, barely like half naked with a couple of, a stick. In this game you start with like a wooden stick, and it's like I'm supposed to go and, jump into that castle and defeat the most powerful entity, so it doesn't make sense, but that is an ultimate challenge, so that is a form of challenge. It's like, that's the point. You play the entire game and slowly you get stronger and stronger, and then that challenge becomes achievable. And the difficulty is, how do we overcome that challenge, or how hard or easy it is to actually reach that challenge, and all the small challenges along the way. I prepared this example, very beautiful example that unfortunately Google Slides ruined all the the animations that I did. So it's a bit simplified now, but it's one practical way just to explain my point further. So here is this game, right? And the challenge is reach the exit. it's a very boring challenge, right? It's like, there's my character on the left, there's the exit, it's open, right? And so the difficulty is super easy. And then it's like, okay, let's make it a little bit harder. I'm gonna lock the door, I'm gonna put a key. So now we adjust, we play a bit with the difficulty itself, right? So it's a little bit harder, there is something more to do now, but it's not that hard. I was like, okay, you know what, I'm gonna just put a huge pit in the middle. Now, difficulty is way, way hard, because this is ridiculous now. It's like, it's the same challenge, by the way, the challenge hasn't changed. I'm still telling you, go reach the exit, but how hard I'm making your life to reach or finish that challenge, that is the part I'm talking about, right? So we have this huge pit. Then I was like, okay, this is too much. I'll add some platforms. Then that will push the difficulty a little bit back down, because they're easy platforms and your character can jump. And I was like, okay, that's too easy. So let's play again with the difficulty. I'm gonna make the platforms move up and down 2 platforms. Now the difficulty is in a sweet spot, right? And if I wanna make it even more difficult, maybe I'll just add an enemy to the thing. And now I push the difficulty even further, right? Again, from the very first point, or the first example, to this point, the challenge doesn't change. My game is side-scroller, you can jump, and here's a challenge, go to the door, but playing with that difficulty, that's the point. So, some ideas or types of difficulty that we can run into is difficulty by complexity, right? Or balancing. You can make your game easy or hard by changing on the numbers, or the lack of it, because some games do lack balance. By design, like the example I shown, I've designed the difficulty. So this basic difficulty does touch a lot on design, game design. This is why it's a very long topic. And the last one is something that, yes, I decided to call, I don't know if it exists or not, but I'm calling difficulty by omission, and we'll get to that. And the first 2 I will kind of quickly go through, but the last 2 are the ones that do require more thought. All right, so the first one, complexity. One sort of difficulty or complexity is information. If we look at this lovely game, if anyone knows it, it's EVE Online, and that game has been notorious for the amount of information that it just throws in your face. And by the way, this is not late game, this is 15 minutes into the game. You make your character, you start the game, and you're just bombarded with this UI. And I tried it not back in 2003, I tried it 10 years later. It didn't change much. But yeah, you have this interface at the bottom where you control your spaceship, and you have to, like I spent, I think, 2 hours just hovering over the UI to understand what is going on, what all these buttons do. And then you have your items, your inventory, you have, I don't know if it's visible here, but right there on the left, there is this entire vertical toolbar with even more windows and more things. So the game is actually pretty good. It has a very strong community, and everyone tells you, it's like, you just have to, accept it, live with it, and just keep going, and the game is gonna be great. Later, I think somewhere around 2018, 2019 is when they decided, okay, this is too much. We're gonna make the game a little bit like with some tutorials. We're gonna do better tutorials, because the only tutorial you get in this game is going to the wiki and reading. So, I'm gonna read this stuff, and then I'm gonna go read more, and then after 5 hours of reading, I can start playing the game. So that's one sort of difficulty. The other one is by mechanics, right? And the very first example that I can think of with mechanics is fighting games. And specifically one of them I found recently is Virtua Fighter 5. Because in fighting games, usually you're required to do a lot of things, right? To master all the moves, think about all the things you have to do. You have to jump and attack and defend and block and throw and do all those right at the same time the game begins. And you're like expected to do all those things. And with Virtua Fighter, every character has a very extensive list of moves. And I don't know who's supposed to memorize all those moves, maybe after playing for 2 years. I don't know. But if you look it up, I just went and looked at the character move list. And for example, this one already has like 3 pages of moves. So imagine, as a player, there's this many things to consider where your character moves, the the opponent's moves and how you counter them and all that. So you're just throwing a lot of mechanics at the player. Dwarf Fortress, I haven't specifically played it, but it is a complex game. It is a simulation of simulations. It is simulations living within simulations. There is one article that came out a year, or I think last year, or something, about how cats got drunk in that game. Because in the tavern, the dwarves can spill beer on the ground and the cats will walk on the floor. So they will, the beer will attach to the cats and the cats will get drunk. So it is, again, a complexity of so many mechanics going around, and it will take time to understand and figure out. So that is a sort of, you can make a fighting game. Again, the challenge is, in a fighting game, what is it? Is to win all the fights and be the top fighter. But you can adjust the difficulty of making, and there are games that do that, right? They do very simple mechanics. Some games play around by giving you the quick buttons. It's like if you press, I don't know, this button, if you mash it twice, the character will automatically do some combos, so you don't have to do them yourself. So that's the thing. How do we handle complexity with our games with difficulty? First thing is tutorialization. You basically make your game step by step and give tutorials. And pacing, right? You want a smooth learning curve. You don't want to just throw everything your game has in front of the player from the very first minute. And that even applies to small, simple game jam games. There's always this situation where people think that, oh, you know, my game is short, so I'm just going to make it extra difficult, just so it's enjoyable. It's not enjoyable. You can always just, you know, make the level a little bit bigger, put things, you know, step them a little bit further away. Basically, you want something like that curve. You start smooth, slow beginning, you introduce a mechanic, you let the player play around with it, give them some time, and it doesn't have to be playing around as huge levels. We're not talking about an open world. It can be as simple as, you know, the character can jump, but it jumps in a specific way, for example, or it has to do something specific. You put a single platform that just explains to the player this idea, and then they will just figure it out. That's it. No enemies, no time, nothing. Just take your time, enjoy it, and just understand how that thing works. Slowly then, the player gets familiar with that mechanic or that piece of information, right? Then the curve goes up. You start introducing more complex things. Difficulty goes up until the plateau point. And the plateau is when the player has mastered your mechanics or understood everything about the game, right? The game is not difficult anymore for them. That point, you want it to be achieved if the game has very few mechanics, or it's not much. You want to achieve that point around the end of your game. So also do not unnecessarily make your game long, that it gets boring. It's like, okay, I've done everything there is to do, and the more is just like a chore, right? So short, sweet experience is still very rewarding to the player, and that will stay with them, right? It's how you end things. It's always the beginning and the end. This is what people remember. So you want to plateau near the end of your game, or if you have multiple mechanics, another option is to string them together. I introduce the first mechanic, the first information, the player is reaching that plateau, right? Then I introduce the new mechanic. It's like the player, okay, has understood that part, then they move on to the next thing. You want to avoid those kinds of curves with the learning curve. You don't want the first one on the left. It's basically the game is too easy, right? I do very little effort. So if we think about the x-axis or the horizontal axis, this is the effort I put and against the performance or what is required. So I put very little effort and I get a lot of things out of it. Then the game gets super easy, super fast, and then it gets boring. The one on the right is EVE Online. I'm starting the game and suddenly, poof, learn all that. So I have to put a ton of effort just to get something out of the game, and the curve goes up. So it's a very steep and high learning curve. It's just a shock to the player. All right, balancing, that's the next one. So you can, again, play with the difficulty of the game with balancing. One of them is resources. So resources in games are typically time, health, ammo, currency, and durability if your game has something that breaks or just doesn't last for a long time. Typical example of games that play with that is survival horror games, something like Silent Hill. They always play with the ammo amount. You're not expected to go around and shooting everyone and killing all the creatures. Most of the time, you're just barely trying to find any ammo or health to stay alive, because the challenge is survive. I need to survive. And I'm making it just difficult enough, just hard enough, so you would feel that excitement of, oh, I just barely made it. I had like, I don't know, 2 bullets and 1 medipack, and I still was able to continue. And then this is the adjustment part. I don't want to throw so much ammo that it becomes a shooter, and I don't want to make the ammo too little and the health too little that the player is just constantly frustrated. They're constantly being killed by the monsters, and there's no way to get around it. This is a good example that I love, Far Cry. I hate that game. The graphics are beautiful, the game is really good, but one thing, again connected to resources, that I kept cursing at the game while playing it is 2 things. It was Far Cry 2, 3, and 4, actually. I don't know if they fixed it in 5 because I just gave up on playing that game. I would go in an enemy outpost, clear the outpost, kill everyone. I turn around, walk literally 10 meters, and I have bullets being thrown, shooting at me from behind. And I turn around, it's like everyone respawned alive and just shooting at me. It's like, dude, didn't I kill you a minute ago? So, and I wasted a lot of ammo, and they're all back fresh with full ammo, and I'm empty. The same thing was with Far Cry 4. The game saves a checkpoint. This was amazing. The game saves a checkpoint. You go, you have a fight, you lose in the fight. You spent, I don't know, 3/4 of your ammo, and then some big guy comes and kills you. You respawn at the checkpoint, your ammo stays the same. It doesn't go back to a checkpoint, and everyone is respawned, all the enemies are back, and you're supposed now to finish the same place or clear it with the 1/4 of the ammo you had. At some point in that game, I ran out completely of ammo because I refused to play any of the side missions. So I was like, I'm not going to do that. And then I ran out of ammo. I ran out of money. I had to play the side mission so I can get some money so I can continue playing the game. It was ridiculous. So that is a point of making the difficulty too frustrating when you play with the resources. Right. The other thing as well when it comes to balancing is stats, right? Again, think of RPGs and stuff like that. You've got the health, speed, damage, abilities of the characters. Something like Monster Hunter Wilds. The enemies, you start adjusting how much damage they apply to the player, how much health they want, they can take, or how much damage they can take basically by playing with these values. It's all a numbers game. Something like Banners of Ruin and Slay the Spire and Darkest Dungeon and all games like that. It's all basically, it's a numbers game. So you adjust those numbers, and that plays into the difficulty of the game. And numbers, not stats, as in actual count, right? So if you look at this example, Dark Souls, very popular, get good, all that stuff. I love the game. But one thing that maybe some people don't notice is it is very hard, but it is fair, and this is why people love it. Because all the difficulty in it is actually balanced well. I guess they did a lot of good playtesting. Most of the hard, difficult enemies, you almost always face them one-on-one. You never have any other enemies around to distract you or to hit you from behind. Speaking of hitting from behind, another example is, I think it was Battlefield or Call of Duty, I think it was Battlefield. The single-player parts in the old times, Battlefield 3, I think. The developers said, what we do is if there are at least more than 4 enemies in front of the player, only 3 or 4 maximum shoot at the player. Not all the 10 enemies shoot at you, because the game should be fun. They want them, once one of them stops shooting, then another one starts shooting at you. And that's the idea, is just to keep it balanced in terms of who's attacking you. Another thing they did is, if you're surrounded by enemies, only the enemies that you see in front of you are the ones that are attacking you. The ones behind you, they just hide and never shoot at you until you actually see them. So this is playing with these numbers as well. And Dark Souls puts you one-on-one with the most difficult enemies so you can just focus on them. As opposed to Dynasty Warriors. Dynasty Warriors, you are overpowered, very strong. To balance it and to make the game challenge and the difficulty good, they throw at you hundreds of enemies, because as you see in the screenshot here, you just do 1 slash and you just wipe away, I don't know, 10 guys. So playing with those numbers as well. If you make it too easy, then the game is boring. You do Dark Souls and you put these numbers of enemies, yeah, now no one's going to play that game. So how do we handle with the balancing? First thing is playtest. Second thing is playtest again. Lots of playtesting, that's very important. And you can always introduce something like difficulty settings, right? You can always give easy, medium, hard, play around with those, adjust those, so players can find what works for them. All right, design. How much time do we got? No, not much. So, design. Time limit. One of my inspirations to make this presentation is the time limit. I hate time limits. I don't know why people really put them, do you need the time limit? Do you actually need to put that in your game? Does it serve a purpose, right? I've played so many games where like, oh, you have to finish the game in 15 seconds. Why? Like, your artist did some really pretty art. I want to look at it, but I can't. I have to run. Because otherwise, you're just going to throw game over. You failed in 15 seconds. Like, again, I start the game. You give me 10 seconds, and I'm supposed to understand where am I, what is going on, what is happening around me, what am I supposed to do, and do it within 15 seconds. So does the time limit really help? It doesn't. It just frustrates the player. Or you can put it in a specific places when it actually has a purpose to serve. And you can think about it. If you introduce it, is it too little time? If it's too little time, that's the frustration I'm talking about. Is it enough time? That's where you want to go. And if it's too much time, then, again, do I need it? Because then you're putting a time limit that doesn't make sense. An example is Resident Evil series. I think they dropped it in the later games, but it was kind of typical. It was their thing. Especially from 1 to, I don't even remember if 4 had it, but usually at the end of the game, you fight a big boss, you know, and the base or wherever you are is going to explode. It's going to blow up. So what you do, you get like 2 minutes to escape from the place you're in. So there is a time limit, but there is a purpose behind it. First of all, it plays into the concept. Oh, there's an explosion, you're going to destroy the whole place and get out of it. So there is a bomb, and you have to run away before the bomb explodes. So that's why there's a time limit. And you have basically finished the entire area, and there's nothing left to do. So they're just kind of pushing you to hurry up to do it. But it is actually just enough time. It is not to punish the player. It's just to create a sense of urgency. So it is not to serve a difficulty for no reason. There is actually no difficulty because the only difficulty is finding your way back, but they give you enough time that you can get out and you still have like, I don't know, 20, 30 seconds left. Another concept that plays with time at this game, I learned about it very recently, 1 hour, 1 life. You create a character, you have to do something, it's a multiplayer game, online, you have 1 hour to do something with that character and it's gone. So time here serves a purpose. It's an experiment of can people build a civilization where each character just lives for 1 hour and goes away. So the whole point is built around the time limit. Okay, designing levels is, again, playing with the difficulty. We're talking about the difficulty here. So difficulty of navigation, the intuitiveness of finding your way around, and the flow, difficulty with getting that flow. So something like Hollow Knight, right, platformer. The platforms are there, but they're easy to navigate. They're not, you can jump to a specific point. As you have a limit of your jump, they put it not right at the edge and you're fighting to get there and you're just gonna throw away the controller because you cannot make that most simple jump. No, you have a double jump. So it's there. It's not meant to kill your flow or sense of navigating the level. You can do it. It's just at a good position, right? I'm not trying to put it as like, yeah, I'm gonna make them, my game has jumping, but I'm gonna make it like they really have to show us that they can jump. No, just let them jump, right? And for those experienced players, late game, we give them something like this. In that game, there is this place called the White Palace, and this is a DLC or something, if I remember right. And there is the Path of Pain, which is there is no ground to stand on. You have to use all the tricks in the game to move around by pogo jumping, by hitting the ground to pogo jump out of it and whatever. The thing is, they put this really hard difficulty only for experienced players. There's actually, you don't lose anything if you don't play it. It's just there to get a little brief part of the story, the backstory. So there's a reward, but you don't feel that you lost anything by not doing it. The game doesn't punish you for not achieving it. It's there for those who got really good at the game and they want something extra. Another example would be Super Meat Boy. Also, you should try that out. It's a really good game. And Super Meat Boy, it looks really tough, but it does help with the intuitiveness. When I talk about intuitiveness and flow, Super Meat Boy breaks your flow, as in you die several times, but once you know the level, and the levels are super, super tiny, you finish a level in 10 seconds. So once you understand the level and the flow is not broken anymore, you can just finish the level and you have that flow of movement. There is nothing interrupting you constantly or obstacles in your face. And you have an intuitiveness. What I mean an intuitiveness is it's clear to the player with the level where they're supposed to go to finish that thing. They're not lost, right? Okay, and with the AI, well, basically it's the strategies. The AI takes reaction time, accuracy, so that connects to the battlefield example, for example, when I talked about the enemies attacking you, and the knowledge and cheating as well. How much does the AI actually knows that the player doesn't know? So examples would be card games, and Stalker 2 had a bunch of complaints in it. When it came out, it still has some complaints. I'm waiting for them to patch it all out to play it. But one thing, when it talks about AI, is people have complained that the AI has really, really good accuracy, and they see you from a kilometer away. You're supposedly sneaking on them, and suddenly you're in darkness, hiding somewhere in a shadow, and they just spot you from a kilometer away, and they start shooting at you, and they don't even miss. All their shots just get straight at you, and this pushes the difficulty of that challenge of clear that area, pushes it way up that it becomes super frustrating to many players, and hence they're complaining about it online. What is up with this? So this goes with the knowledge, cheating, and accuracy, and reaction time. The AI just reacts super fast. That doesn't make sense. So these are things also to play around to adjust your difficulty. So again, with the design, we're on a play test to make sure we got the right difficulty. Cut the pointless time limits. If it doesn't serve a purpose, don't have it. Cut the pointless obstacles. Don't just throw things in the player's face just to think it's going to make it more fun. It doesn't make it more fun if it doesn't make sense. And empower the players to come up with their own crazy solutions and ideas. If you see someone does something that you didn't expect, empower them. Don't block it. Don't stop it. Let them do it. It's a reward for them that they're smart enough. They outsmarted the designer to do something to achieve it or go around what you did, right, to stop them. And you want to cheat for your players sometimes. Things like what Mikhail talked about with Celeste, for example. Celeste is known for cheating for the player by giving them time to grab onto ledges, to fall off ledges, to jump and attach on them, and all those things. It actually does. It's the coyote time, and I don't know, it's not pixel perfect on the edges, and so on. So it gives you a lot of allowance, and that's what you want. You want to empower the player. Okay, the last one, because I'm really running out of time. Okay, is omission, which ties into the previous one, but what I mean by difficulty by omission, it's basically all actually the negative things, the bad difficulty, which is when we forget things as designers, when we build our challenges and we play with how easy or hard they are. So an example of omission is omission of information, right? And the world awareness is one of them. Does the player know the things that we know? Or do they actually know the things we expect them to know? All right, are they understanding of the world around them? This is the best quality image I could find. This is from Metal Gear Solid 2 back in 2001, and Metal Gear Solid 1 did the same as well. What they did is you have rooms. You go around a base in multiple rooms. You are not able to see. It's an action game. I should have shown a bigger picture, but it's top down. So your view is limited. You can see a limited area of the space you're in, right? And you cannot see all the enemies either. So what the game helps, what information to keep the player aware, the information they need to be able to overcome their challenges and not make it too difficult, is awareness of their surroundings. So there's always in the corner, the top corner of the screen, right where I put the image, is a map of every space you're in, and the dots that represent the enemies. And that cone shows you where the enemies are looking, so you're always aware of where you are and can they see you or not. You're even aware of how alert they are. If the color is blue, then they're chilled and you can sneak very easily. They will take time to react, they're slow to react, back to the AI reaction time. And if it's yellow, that means they're alert. As soon as they will see you, they will shoot. So you know you better hide for some time. So the player is always aware of their surroundings. And that pushes the difficulty of navigating the space and the enemies a bit down. A more recent example is Metal Gear Solid 5 from 2015. An awareness of the world. So you have the world map whenever you're playing, and you get a lot of information here. You get where you are. There is this blip, the white one, that shows you where your target is for the mission. It shows you the limits of your play area with this rectangle, where your companion is, where all the resources are, and even these things on the right there with the red colors is how prepared the enemy is to fight against you. So these things, we shouldn't hide them from the player. The player needs to be aware of those things to actually enjoy the game, because the challenge is finish the mission, be smart, figure out the best way you do it. It's an open game. And I want to give the player the information they need to overcome that challenge, not to hide it away from them and be like, ha ha ha, you didn't know that they had a sniper, did you? Another example is Hitman, Absolution. I think Absolution was the first one they started it, is to give the player a sense of awareness of the world. I don't like it, personally, I turn it off. Luckily, they have an option to turn it off. But you get this, what they call is the something instinct, I don't know, instinct mode or something, where you switch it on, and if the game is too hard, if it's too difficult for you, then what it does, it highlights all the enemies through walls even, and those that are patrolling, you can see this line of flame that shows you where they're actually gonna go. You don't have to hide that. The player then can start to map out or strategize how they're going to move around the level. Based on that information, they can find their target or to get also using that instinct mode. Very old example, but very good one, is Commandos 2. There are two lines here. When the enemy sees you, again, the awareness, this is both AI and awareness of the space around you. When the enemy sees you, first they have a blue line, they take their time, they're suspicious of you. And then when it turns red, they have spotted you, they're gonna attack. But the point is, again, you're not hiding that from the player. If you designed your game that the enemy will take time, you're telling the player how much time they have. It starts blue and it starts flashing and then poof, red. And that helps the player, again, challenge doesn't change, difficulty is just not as high. They understand what's going on. Another omission of information is the actions, what the player does. How does it affect their game, right? So, Walking Dead, you know, the memeable thing that started, this is the game that started the meme with someone is gonna remember that. They decided, it's like, okay, the player does something, the world will change, the game will react, but how does the player know? Because it doesn't make sense. Again, it's difficult and challenging and a little bit stupid if I do something and it's like, oh yeah, that happened because you did that 2 hours ago. It's like, how the hell should I know, right? So the game decided, it's like, okay, this character is gonna remember what you did, so think about that. So now the player is aware of their consequences, this information. Even in the very old games, Quake, 1996, they don't have to show it to you, but when you find a secret area, it tells you you found a secret area. The reason is the game has stats. It tells you that this level has 3 secret areas. Can you find them all? Okay, you found one. I'm gonna let you know that you found it. And it doesn't always have to be text, by the way. It can be text, graphics, sound effects. With Quake, there is a sound effect that plays when you find something, like as a reward. It's like you found that secret area, good job. And even up to now, the thing that maybe most of you just see but never think about is all the games that have quests. You get a notification that you finished that quest. Think about how weird and hard it's gonna be to play your game when you're doing your quests and be like, okay. And you just go, you give the item to the character and you move on. I was like, okay, did it work? I have no idea what's going on, right? So do not hide this information. Location as well, whereabouts. Silent Hill 2. Two things in that. I'm almost done, by the way. Two things about that is the map, right? It's a survival horror, you should find your way. So the first thing that, again, a lot of us don't think about is giving the player a map. So you're aware all the time of your surroundings. And the next beautiful thing that they did, and it's very subtle, and I don't think games did that before Silent Hill 1 and 2, is all those markings on the map, right? And they made it even better with the remake that came out last year. You get those markings. So I'm lost. The challenge is find your way out and survive, but I'm not going to make it hell for you. I'm going to give you a map to make you aware of where you're going, and wherever you go and there's a block in your way, you just mark it on the map for you. So again, I'm not making it your life extra hard. You don't have to keep going to the same spot over and over again and be like, right, no, it's blocked. No, now you know. It's like, okay, I need to go here. There's a jukebox. There's a puzzle. I need to solve it there. So the game points out for me. It's like, okay, you need to survive, but we're going to help you out a bit. We're going to give you some information about where things are. Fatal Frame series did something really nice, which is when you go around the mansion or the place you're in the map, every door you find, if it's locked and you don't have a key or it's just locked, they mark the door on the map and color it red. Once you unlock the door, or if it's open, they mark it as green. And yellow is, I don't remember, it's something like a door that goes only in one direction. So again, it's information. They don't hide that information from the player. It's going to be like, it's a horror game, so you're going to be stuck there for hours trying to find the right door. It's not fun. It's just too hard and too annoying and too frustrating. Omitting rules. Yes, hidden rules and breaking rules. Chess. People like it because everyone knows the rules. No one can break the rules. I cannot just suddenly take my rook and go diagonally and be like, yeah, that's the new rule now. You cannot do that. People love Dark Souls and Elden Ring because everyone abides by the same rules. The player has rules, and the rules apply on the enemy. So the game feels fair. It's difficult, but it's not difficult to the point that it's just too much or frustrating. If you lose stamina, you cannot fight. The enemy also has a hidden stamina, right? They can attack you, but then they have to stop for a while to get back their stamina and attack again. They can break your poise when you're guarding. You can break their poise. So there are the rules, and the game never breaks those rules. Maybe with the bosses, with the bigger ones, but besides that, the game doesn't break rules and doesn't really hide them from you. They're there. You see them through animations, through sound effects and visuals. Again, Breath of the Wild. The game gives you one rule or one piece of information. You can parry attacks if you time your parry right. Well, guess what? Lionels are one of the toughest enemies in the game, and they have attacks that are crazy. And I found out recently as well that the game respects the rule that if you time your parry right, you will block the attack. This guy throws fireballs at you. If you time your parry right, you can block the fireballs. And you can block their all attacks, and people online will be like, yeah, once you get good with it and you know how to block it, it turns into a teddy bear. Portal gives you the rules. Where there is a surface, you can place a portal. It never breaks those rules, and there are no hidden rules. The only rule is the surface has to be flat, and there's one type of surface, like this black one, where you cannot put a portal on it. The game never breaks that rule. It never tells you, no, you cannot do that anymore. Hence, you can cheat around the rules, but not cheating. You bend the rules, and the game empowers you to do that. If you find really weird places to throw your portals and do something and just not do the things that the designers expected, they do not stop you. They're like, these are the rules, we're going to stick with them. We're not going to break them. And that's important. So handling the omission, the player must know everything they need to know. Right? So the player must know all the rules of your game. You have to respect the rules, because then you're making the difficulty not even hard, it just becomes stupid. And the people will rage quit and leave your game. And there are always exceptions. This is the last thing. There are exceptions to the rules, of course, if it's part of the game, to break the rules or play around with the difficulty, but the player has to be aware that you're actually doing that, so they're in on it. They're enjoying it as well. An example is Trap Adventure 2. The game basically throws out the opposite of everything I just said. It's you jump on a platform, the platform disappears, you stand next to those spikes, the spikes turn around and hit you and kill you. The game just breaks all the rules, but that's the point of the game. It's just a parody and it's supposed to be fun or funny. Last thing, personal recommendation to know what not to do, and it's all about difficulties, is check out Angry Video Game Nerd channel on YouTube, especially the earlier episodes. Let's say the first, I don't know, 200 episodes. The guy has been around for 15 or 17 years. He's done over 200, but up to the first 200 or whatever. What he does is he plays the worst games ever. Nintendo, Sega, whatever, the old games. But we can still learn something from those old games because he finds the worst games possible, plays them in a bit of a review kind of way, but it teaches you what frustrates your player because he actually makes valid points. It's like, why is he angry? Why is the game frustrating? And it's all valid points that he makes. So it's something to think about. It's like, oh, no checkpoints. Controls are shit. I don't know, different things. The enemies just spawn out of nowhere. No information. Most of the things that I talked about. So it's a good thing that's fun. Like you learn from it and it's fun to watch. I would say questions, but I don't think we have time for questions. So if you want to get in touch, you can find me through those links and information. And that's it from me. Thank you very much.